Across Tasmania, this is Tas News 24 with Kane Dello.
While the rest of the world waited on a tweet, George Pell was sitting inside Barwon Prison with his legal team. It was those lawyers who broke the news to the Cardinal. He was no longer a prisoner, but still very much in need of protection, flanked by a police escort for the journey back to the city.
Sorry, I'm not dressed a bit better, but I didn't expect this.
Hello and welcome to the program. What you just witnessed were scenes from Tuesday when Cardinal George Pell was released from prison after the High Court ruled in his favour and was acquitted of the 5 counts of child sexual abuse convictions. George Pell was serving a 6-year jail sentence after he was found guilty by jury for the alleged abusing of 2 13-year-old choir boys in the 1990s. Pell had served just over a year behind bars when the High Court ruled the jury ought to have had reasonable doubt as to the Cardinal's guilt. It's placed high tensions across the nation, and some have said the justice system has again failed to support those victims of child abuse who speak out. The courts have said they hope this doesn't discourage other victims of sexual abuse to come forward, but the actions of the High Court demonstrate something different and leaves victims questioning their trust within the legal system. Barristers and legal teams across the nation have said the High Court have made a number of errors on the facts and raises some fundamental questions about how the system dealt with the allegations. It has now been said that the Royal Commission that handed all information about alleged Catholic priests committing sexual abuse acts, including that of George Pell, should be lifted and presented. The final reports were heavily redacted, and victims have said this should finally be released to the public. This case also lifts the lid on so many other legal avenues which are currently being pursued. George Pell is facing a number of civil legal matters against him pursuant by other victims and by family members of victims who have said Pell knew of the sexual abuse committed by these Catholic priests but did nothing to stop it. The tensions against the freedom that Pell has been given was recently expressed on the doors of St Patrick's Cathedral in Melbourne with the phrase "Rot in hell, Pell," as seen in this picture captured by a 9 News reporter. George Pell was driven by a motorcade from Victoria to Sydney, where he's currently residing with family and most certainly will be returning to the Victorian courts in the not-so-distant future to answer to those number of civil legal issues that are currently outstanding.
Stay home and save lives. To stay at home, to save lives. Stay home and that they save lives.
The Premier of Tasmania, Peter Gutwein, drumming into the heads of every Tasmanian that they should stay home and save lives, especially over this Easter break. The message got more intense yesterday at a press conference when the Premier went on to say,
and to be frank, today the gloves come off. I've spoken to the Police Commissioner this morning. We are going to police this. The period of education is over. If you go to a shack and you shouldn't be there and you don't have a reasonable excuse to be there, and you get a knock on the door, you will be asked to leave and go back to your primary residence. If you don't leave, then you can be arrested. You will be summoned and you will be charged. The penalty will be up to 6 months in jail or $16,800. Now, this is serious. Today, we'll be putting helicopters up. There will be eyes in the sky. We want to ensure that we protect Tasmanians. It is not good enough to be hearing reports of campers and trailers heading to the East Coast. It is simply not good enough to think that you can blatantly break these rules. People's lives are being put at risk.
So what does that mean for Tasmanians thinking of heading to holiday homes or their shacks along the beach? Well, think again, as police will be out in full force, and the Premier made it very clear that heavy penalties apply to those seen breaking the new rules. With the 1,300 current serving police officers in Tasmania trying to police a state of more than 500,000 people, it will be a difficult task ahead to maintain order, especially if people decide to go against the Premier's rules of not attending their shacks. The state has now more than 111 cases of people testing positive to COVID-19, and sadly there has been a further outbreak in the northwest of the state, centring around the Northwest Regional Hospital. It appears the Premier failed to listen to the advice given by health workers, including doctors from that region. Only 3 weeks ago, we reported of people having tested positive to COVID-19, but the Premier, along with his government, denied there were any new cases in that area and dismissed our report. It was then his government also had our Facebook page shut down. Tas News 24 can confirm that 3 cases of people testing positive to COVID-19 were presented to the government and the office of the Premier, but they dismissed the reports as being false, even though it was coming from local doctors and medical staff from within the Northwest Regional Hospital. With the government failing to act on a number of weeks ago, it allowed a further spread of the virus, causing it to lead into an outbreak. Now it seems the Premier is making it about the people of Tasmania ignoring his new rules, when in fact it does question if the Premier had acted on the advice he received some 3 weeks ago, would there be a major outbreak in the Northwest region today. The Premier has pushed his hard attack of police making no exceptions when it comes to people breaking the law over this Easter long weekend, and advising the people of Tasmania to do the right thing and stay at home, and not travel unless it's essential. This comes in a conflicting manner from the Premier, especially when his new strict border restrictions were put in place for people coming into the state. On Wednesday of this week, our cameras were there to capture the moment a Qantas flight from Melbourne touched down in Launceston. On board, a number of passengers were escorted onto an awaiting bus to transport them to their hotel room for their strict 14-day quarantine. But it appears not every person in quarantine is obeying the new regulations outlined and enforced by the Premier. There have been a number of cases of people breaking quarantine to go and get food and alcohol without even thinking of the serious implications this has on other members of the public. These actions have occurred in both Hobart and Launceston, with one 50-year-old man breaking the rules twice and finally being arrested and appeared in the Launceston Magistrates Court briefly yesterday and was granted bail. The man's lawyer said he will be entering a not guilty plea when he returns to court on May the 6th. It would appear Premier Gutwin should have implemented these strict border restrictions sooner rather than later, as it seems many are slipping through the cracks, not to mention the police also breaking the new laws, with this picture taken by a photographer for the Examiner newspaper that featured in a recent article written by Sue Bailey. In the picture you can clearly see police are not wearing any face or hand protection nor obeying the 1.5 metre rule, with one officer leaning on the driver's door of their vehicle. This message that police along with the Examiner are sending out to the public is only causing confusion and a blatant disregard for the seriousness of how COVID-19 is affecting our state. Print media, who is now mainly going digital due to closures of regional newspapers across the nation shutting down because of the pandemic. We feel it's now more important than ever to report truthful, factual stories when it comes to reporting anything around COVID-19. Let's hope the Examiner start taking these matters seriously and start reporting correct news instead of printing misleading information that sadly some people still actually pay money for. A 16-year-old male from Launceston has been charged after evading police and driving in excess of 130 kilometres without an appropriate licence. The youth, who holds an L1 licence, evaded police in Devonport Wednesday evening. The vehicle in which the youth was driving at the time of the offending was spiked, and the youth was arrested a short time later. Police have charged the 16-year-old with 3 counts of evade police, 3 counts of reckless driving, and 3 counts of a learner driver being unaccompanied by a licensed driver. The youth was bailed to appear in the Launceston Youth Court in July. Now let's take a look at the state's weather for the Easter long weekend. In Hobart today it was partly cloudy and reached 19. Tonight Hobart will have an overnight low of 9. Saturday Hobart will see some showers looking at a high of 13 and a low of 8. Sunday will be partly cloudy conditions and looking for a top of 14 and a low of 9. In Devonport today it was cloudy for most of the day. It reached a high of 17 and tonight will get down to 9. Saturday it will be partly cloudy throughout the day, looking at a high of 16 and an overnight low of 8. Expect the same conditions for Sunday, partly cloudy, going for a top of 16 and a low of 9. Today in Launceston it was mostly cloudy conditions. It reached a high of 18 and tonight looking at a low of 9. Saturday cloud will increase, looking at a top of 16 and an overnight low of 6. As for Sunday, the cloudy conditions will be sticking around for most of the day, looking at a high of 17 and a low of 7. Well, that's our program for this evening, but before we go, I'd like to give you an update as to the ongoing situation with the shutdown of our Facebook page that was ordered by the Tasmanian Government and the Premier. I can confirm with you that we have been in regular contact with Facebook Compliance and they are currently assessing our appeal we lodged against the government's complaint. We hope to have a positive resolution soon. However, you can still keep up to date via our website at tasnews24.net. Until next week, have a lovely Easter break with your family at home and take care of yourself and others. Bye for now.